Though it may seem like the decade was only yesterday, we're actually now closer to the 2030s than we are to the 2010s, and if that doesn't give you an existential crisis, then I don't know what will. In our experience, though, nothing takes away the constant anxiety induced by simply being alive, quite like scaring yourself silly with a good spooky video game or two. Don't quote me on that, though, I'm definitely not a medical professional. If you're in the market for a good fright, preferably one that's a few years old, well then you've come to the right place. For today's list, we're casting our minds back to the 2010s to collate the absolute scariest video game moments of that decade. Please bear in mind that this list is based on nothing but our own personal opinions, so if you don't agree, well, I'm sure you'll let us know all about it one way or another. A spoiler warning is in full effect. I'm Ben from TripleJump, and here are the 10 most terrifying video game moments of the 2010s. Number 10. The Bear Trap, Until Dawn, 2015. We're kicking off today's list with a moment that's so obviously a setup for a jump scare that it might as well have a flashing neon sign attached that reads, "There is about to be a jump scare." Still, jump we did, and scared we were. Until Dawn is an interactive horror adventure that puts players in charge of a bunch of feckless teenagers and tasks them with trying to keep the idiots alive whilst they're stranded on a mountain that may or may not be infested with supernatural beasties. Spoiler alert, it is. Whilst on the hunt for whomever he believes to have killed his girlfriend, largely unlikable jock hunk Mike winds up in an abandoned sanatorium, and it's there that players will get perhaps the biggest fright in the game. Entering a room, Mike finds a disembodied hand waving at him, which is, I'm sure you'll agree, totally normal. It's up to players what happens next, but if they choose not to ignore the obvious danger, Mike will get his hand stuck in a bear trap and either have to sacrifice his trusty machete or hack off his own fingers to free himself. This is why we don't go messing with ominous amputated limbs, people. Number 9. The Noontech Diagnostic Machine, Dead Space 2, 2011. You've probably used the phrase, "I'd rather stick pins in my eyes" at some point in your life when faced with the prospect of an unpleasant task, but I think it's fair to say that there are few things we have to do on a day-to-day basis that would be less preferable than getting a sharp object inserted into the ocular region. Alas, in Dead Space 2, poor old Isaac Clarke has no choice but to literally endure a needle straight through the pupil. The Noontech Diagnostic Machine is a bit of kit Isaac comes across which has the power to stimulate the part of the brain where the marker signal stores its instructions, knowledge, and blueprints. The downside to this is that it does so by jamming a big old needle into the user's eye. Regrettably though, Isaac can't hope to complete his quest without the information the machine will unlock, and so he's forced to endure what we can only assume is the most agonizing pain imaginable. The sequence is utterly horrifying, and it's not at all helped by the fact that the player is tasked with guiding the needle into Isaac's eye. It's bad enough if they do it successfully, but if they get it wrong, let's just say it's going to be a very expensive visit to the opticians. Number 8. The Child's Room, Layers of Fear. As horror games go, Layers of Fear is a bit of an odd one. There are no enemies to fight or avoid, and all players have to do is keep on progressing through the rooms of a house, solving the odd puzzle here and there. Despite its lack of ghouls, goblins, or other beasties though, it's still scary as all hell. The game chronicles the downfall of a tortured artist as he works on his magnum opus and leads players to uncover what sent him on his downward spiral. They do this by exploring the artist's home as the artist himself. However, his fractured psyche causes all manner of strange things to happen. One of these occurrences takes place as the artist goes into a child's room. Upon entering, the room looks fairly normal, but before long, things go south. After players insert the key into the music box, the room begins to spin. This is disconcerting in and of itself, and it only gets worse from there. The music becomes discordant, darkness engulfs the room, toys start to move by themselves, eerie drawings and writings start to appear on the walls, and a sort of vortex of dolls threatens to suck the artist into the abyss. Then, as quickly as it all began, it's all over. Horrid. Just horrid. Number 7. Dining with Cannibals, Telltale's The Walking Dead Season 1, 2012. Getting together with friends and family for a nice, hearty meal is usually a joyous occasion. After all, what's more pleasant than enjoying good food, perhaps a glass of wine or two, and pleasant conversation with those you love the most? If you are in a horror game though, dinner is not usually such a jubilant experience, especially if it turns out that your friends and family are on the menu. Telltale's The Walking Dead Season 1 takes place at the beginning of the Walker outbreak and sees protagonist Lee attempting to reunite a young girl named Clementine with her parents. In episode 2, Starved for Help, Lee and the other survivors find themselves running low on food and so take up the offer of two brothers who say they will give them food in exchange for gasoline. After arriving at the dairy farm, however, Lee suspects shenanigans begins to be afoot, and he soon discovers exactly how the farm owners, the St. John family, are keeping themselves fed. They're eating people. It's a horrifying reveal that will shake players to their very core and have them seriously considering whether or not to accept the next time someone invites them over to their house for dinner. Oh dear. Number 6. The Groom. Outlast Whistleblower. 2014. For many people, finding that special someone is very important, and some go to a lot of trouble to find a person they really connect with, be that utilizing services like Tinder or Match.com, trying out speed dating, or doing as many social activities as possible in order to get acquainted with new people. Thankfully, we don't think anyone in history has gone to the same lengths as Outlast Whistleblower's Eddie Gluskin to find a life partner. Whistleblower, which was released as DLC for Outlast in 2014, tells the story of Waylon Park, the man from whom the main game's protagonist, Miles Upshur, got his tip-off. After sending his whistleblowing email, Waylon is detained by his supervisor but is able to escape his clutches. He's not out of the woods though, and before long he meets Eddie Gluskin, aka The Groom, a man intent on finding, or rather creating, the perfect bride. We won't go into the gory details of what Eddie likes to get up to. In fact, to be honest, the screen probably is entirely blurred at this point, but suffice it to say that he's rather creative with a scalpel in certain areas. Ugh, I'm crossing my legs just thinking about it. You stay away from my unmentionables with that knife, you hear me, Gluskin? Number 5. You Can't Hide. Alien Isolation. 2014. Generally speaking, in video games, if you're able to find a good spot to hide, you'll be safe from whatever it is that's hunting you. Unfortunately, this isn't the case in 2014's Alien Isolation. Taking place 15 years after the events of 1979's Alien Isolation centers on Amanda Ripley, daughter of everyone's favorite cat-toting space heroine Ellen Ripley. Ellen has gone missing, and determined to get to the bottom of her disappearance, Amanda investigates the good ship Sevastopol. Bad news for her though, because she's not the only one on board. As you might be able to glean from the game's title, there's an alien about, and said alien is not of the friendly E.T. variety. As such, players will need to avoid it at all costs, and sometimes their only option is to hide in a locker and hope for the best. Not only is the alien not pleasant, it's also not an idiot, and if you're not careful, it will know exactly what you're up to. Before you know it, your hiding spot has been rumbled, the alien's torn Amanda to shreds, and you're sat sobbing on your sofa in a puddle of your own making. Hope you know a good upholstery cleaner. Number 4. The Flooded Room. Amnesia: The Dark Descent. 2010. In all honesty, the entirety of Frictional Games' Amnesia: The Dark Descent is fairly gosh darn petrifying, with everything from the monsters themselves to the fact that leading lad Daniel can't fight back against them, having the power to give players the willies. Still, there is one part of the game that's more fear-inducing than the rest, and that's the flooded basement. Whilst exploring Brennenburg Castle, Daniel is forced to head down to the cellar archives, which seem to have something of a plumbing problem. Players will soon realize, thanks to some well-timed splashes, that Daniel isn't alone down there, and they'll need to help him navigate the cellar, being careful to stay out of the water as much as possible. What makes this area particularly scary though is the fact that the Kernk, the monster that lurks down there, is completely invisible, and players can only keep track of it by keeping an eye on the water. Oh, and should it get a hold of Daniel, it will end him pretty much immediately. More Kernks are encountered throughout the game, and they remain hellishly scary, but there's nothing quite like the first time you're faced with one. Number 3. Meeting Lisa. PT. 2014. Oh, Silent Hills. You held so much promise, but the cruelty of fate means that we'll never get to experience all you had to offer. And thanks to Konami, we can't even go back to your playable teaser ever again either. Oh well, such is life. Despite taking most players less than an hour to complete, PT managed to be one of the scariest gaming experiences of the 2010s, maintaining a palpable level of tension throughout that kept terrified players on the edge of their seats. The game sees its unnamed hero waking up in a house with infinitely looping corridors and seemingly no means of escape. As he progresses, he hears a story on the radio of a man who has murdered his whole family, which is disconcerting, but it's got nothing on what's to come. You see, our plucky protagonist isn't alone in this house, and it's not long before players come face to face with Lisa, a hostile apparition. The inescapable dwelling and PT's overall atmosphere are more than enough to send chills down the spine of the most seasoned of horror veterans, but Lisa's horrifying visage will have even the least anxious of you cowering in pure terror. Number 2. Stalked by Jack Baker. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. 2017. The start of the decade was somewhat rough for the Resident Evil franchise. Resi 6 released in 2012 to less than stellar reviews, although it is absolutely the best one ever made. And so the pressure truly was on for Resident Evil 7 Biohazard to prove that the series hadn't lost its edge. Well, Resi 7 did that and then some, returning the franchise to its survival horror roots and packing in plenty of frights while it did so. There were numerous moments from Resi 7 that we could have chosen for this list, but whilst the buggy brush with Marguerite and Lucas's sadistic Saw-style escape room are scary, there's nothing in the title more chilling than being stalked around the Baker house by patriarch Jack. Protagonist Ethan Winters finds himself at the Baker estate after he receives a video message from his presumed dead wife Mia urging him to stay away. After finding her and then getting knocked the flip out by Jack, Ethan awakens to a delightful home-cooked meal. He's not a particularly good guest though, and the first chance he gets, he makes a run for it. Jack Baker doesn't care much for rudeness though, and as Ethan desperately tries to escape, he gives chase. The segment is thoroughly anxiety-inducing, with players never knowing where Jack is likely to pop up. Still, Jack isn't the most terrifying stalker of the 2010s, nor even of the Resident Evil series. Number 1. Mr. X makes himself known. Resident Evil 2 Remake, 2019. Usually, on a list like this, we'd limit ourselves to one entry per franchise, but when it came down to it, we couldn't decide whether to give Jack Baker or Mr. X the boot, so in the end, we chose to keep them both. It's our list after all. What are you gonna do about it, huh? In Resident Evil 2 Remake, players join Leon S. Kennedy and Claire Redfield as they puzzle their way through several different locations in the hope of escaping a zombie-infested Raccoon City. Whilst they're exploring the police precinct, a helicopter crashes into the building, cutting off their path. This crash is more than a minor inconvenience, however, as it's later revealed that along with the aircraft came a rather unwanted visitor, Mr. X. As Claire or Leon round a corner and come upon the wreckage, it's lifted out of the way by the hulking, unkillable trenchcoat-sporting lad who proceeds to stalk them around the rest of the game, dishing out some mighty hard hits should he ever catch up. Trust us, you'll never react to the sound of approaching footsteps in the same way ever again.